All right. Well, you recording? You can record now. All right. We are about to start. So what I'm going to do is, hi Susan, come on in, come on in. Here's my iPad. Let me pull this up. All right. Well, thank you for being here. Those of you who are here this morning, I imagine others will trickle in, but I want to get us started. This is being recorded. They'll all be recorded, so some people are just going to start this week by watching one later, I think, if they help, they'll make it here in time. So, you all know me. My name is A.J. Smith, and I am right now in the process of earning my doctorate degree in spiritual direction and formation at Fuller Seminary in California. Now, my final project involves a written dissertation as well as an on-the-ground research project. So the title of my dissertation is called A Practical Ecotheology for New England Churches. So that's a written academic paper, but I'm required to also have an on-the-ground portion that I can show my work for. So it's basically studying the relationship between Christians and nature or people and the earth, particularly in the context of New England. So the idea of this seminar is for me to give you a very brief overview of my research and my ideas to see if they're helpful, to see if they inspire a group of First Baptist people to embrace a new project or initiative, one that would ideally bring First Baptist closer to God, the earth, and our neighbors. Now here's my big caveat. My degree does not depend on how well this goes, okay? You are under no obligation to fabricate the experience or do anything to make me look good, all right? Or to make this experience seem more interesting or more helpful than it is. My teachers are mainly concerned that I do this, I get the data, I publish the data, and if this is a flop, I simply report that and publish it. And it does not in any way affect my doctoral candidacy. My dissertation will be written, and it's like, oh, try this out, collect data, see how it goes. So if this doesn't turn out that good, just say so. It's okay. So I really want to thank you for coming, and I really appreciate the sacrifice you are making to help me with this, Lord willing, final part of my education journey. So the first thing I want to do is actually hand out an overview, hand out some handouts for you right now, and we'll go from there. Take one, pass it around. Take one, pass it around. Take one, pass it around. And one more time if anyone needs that. No. Thank you, though. That's for me. It has to be anonymous. So, I didn't prepare clipboards for everyone, so when we do the writing portion, I'm going to need you to just grab a hymnal or something like that to write on. So, that was my introduction. Next, before we move on, so you can follow along with me in the Ecotheology Seminar Session 1 handout. That's going to be an overview of what I'm doing. The other one is a survey, and the other one is just something you need to read to yourself. So if you follow along, you see number 1 is introduction. Number 2 is defining terms. Are we all there? Okay. Okay. Take your time. Take your time. Oh, okay. My bad. Let me help. All righty. All right. Thank you all. So, if you would look first at the Ecotheology Seminar Session 1 packet. So that's what you're going to be using just to kind of follow along with me to kind of understand what I'm doing. So we just did the introduction. The next one is defining terms. I'm going to define a few terms for you so you can understand what we're talking about, especially before you take this survey. The first term I want to define for you is ecology. Ecology, and they're written right there, so in your packet, the definitions are right there. Ecology is the study of the relationships between organisms, including humans, and their environment. So ecology studies plants in a pond. Theology studies birds in a tree, right? Any living thing and its environment, that's ecology. Theology is a study of God or religious belief, right? Literally means study of God, but religious belief. So theology studies the questions, oh, what do you believe about the Bible? What do you believe about God? What do you believe about the afterlife? That's theological questions. So ecotheology is a combining of those things, right? So the study of relationship between God, humanity, and nature. So it takes the ecology question and brings theology into it and says, okay, there is relationships between living organisms and their environment. What does God say about that, right? What is God's intention beyond that? And particularly, we're talking about what is the human's relationship with the environment supposed to be according to God? So, for our purposes, discussing eco-theology involves examining the church's teaching and the Christian's relationship with the natural world, which I'm summarizing as far as my project is land, plants, and animals. So in other words, what does the Bible teach our relationship with nature should be? What does the church teach? What is a Christian's ideal relationship according to the Bible with animals, plants, and land, things like that? And some questions that would help frame this are, what is God's relationship to nature? What does the Bible teach about our relationship with nature? And does our faith or something else inform our interactions with nature, whether you have positive or negative interactions with the environment? Are you doing so because of a religious belief, or does some other source inform you? So those are just definitions. So here's what I want you to do right now. Point number 3 is your 2 other papers. The one is called Informed Consent. The other one is your survey. So one of the ways I'm collecting data on this, and this is where you don't have to butter up anything, you're just going to take a survey, anonymous survey, don't write your name on it, which is just 1 through 5 answers on there. Go through that survey and take it, and then hand it back to me. And what we're going to do at the end of these 4 seminars in the next month, I'm going to give you the same survey again exactly, all right? And then we'll just see, did the results change or not? Okay, so that's just one way I'm collecting data. So why don't you take some time now. You have the informed consent. Just read that. This just tells you that you're part of research, but it's anonymous and you're not actually having to go do anything anywhere. So it's a very innocuous form of research, but it gives you my teacher's info. So take this, read the informed consent, then take whatever time you need for the survey. If you have questions, feel free to ask me. I can help give you, define some terms if you need so in the survey. so spiritual but not religious. So those, you can ignore those goals, actually. I could have even taken them out. Thank you for that. So yeah, those are kind of more for really my teacher to see. So those are like my 3 goals for my project. And so I wrote them above which questions are pertaining to them. Yes, so SPNR, good question. That means spiritual but not religious. These things we will get to later, so I should think. But yeah, you can just ignore those gold parts and just go with them. Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out. No one would have known that.
Is that a thing? SPNR?
Yeah, so it's spiritual not religious. Yeah, so that's it.
Christians or?
No, so that's we'll talk about that. That's a group of people that's growing. Usually you take a survey. So I'm a Christian. They have surveys of Christian, I'm atheist, I'm Jew, and whatever. Spiritual not religious is a new category. That's very big. These are just none. When they realize that further, what do you mean by none? Not atheist, spiritual but not religious. So that's we'll talk about that next week. That's kind of the spiritual context of prayer. More. Okay. Just pop it in there, we'll pass this around. If you need another minute, feel free to take it. But if you are done, yeah, just a survey. Yep, just a survey. So keep your packet and your informed consent on it. But yeah, just put the survey in. Janice, or go ahead. Good job. You can do it. Just put it in there when you're done. Now forget to use the microphone just because this is going on Zoom and or YouTube, and that's the way my voice will actually get picked up. So I'm gonna try and keep this close by. How's that sound? Is that good? All right. So we're going to jump into the presentation now. The first week, now in the future weeks, we'll just jump right in like this. This first one is called Learn the History, or what I call the religious history of the region. Don't take that title too seriously. We're narrowing in on a very few historical pieces. But before we do that, I just want you to sit back, and I'm going to read to you something I wrote for a paper I did last year that was kind of moving me in this direction. I was sitting in the backyard and I wrote this, trying to give context to the place from which I was writing, because it's important not only to, oh, I have opinions about this, but also what does it mean right here and now where I live? So sit back, listen to this, and here's me as I try to make sense of Brantford. As I write these words, I am seated in a plastic chair with my bare feet resting in a blend of native clover, dandelion, and non-native grasses introduced to create lawns inspired by 18th century French landscaping. In my foreground is a newly planted common milkweed brought to this place with hopes of reestablishing the local monarch butterfly population. Lifting my gaze skyward, I see the tip of a massive Norwegian spruce cresting over the parsonage roof, one of the elder brothers known by name only to our family. To my left is a paradise apple tree, which never fruits despite an otherwise healthy appearance. Sumac, pin oak, maple, and black pine are to my right. Directly behind me stands a few lanky black ash trees whose foliage almost obscures the Hummers housed at the armory across the fence. Over the military apparatus stands a telephone pole-sized post crowned with a massive osprey nest, an act of reparations by the electric company after several osprey met their fate in an electric fire years prior. Osprey return annually to breed with their partner and feast on the bunker and other schooling fish nearby, and this family enjoys the banquet offered by the Branford River, an ocean-fed tidal runoff just out of view from where I sit. Marching fiddler crabs and blooming mussels dot the banks of the river. As the muddy edges give way to rocky outcroppings, clams and oysters latch onto submerged boulders with surprising strength. Around the bend of Branford River sits a brewery with both land and water access, featuring local brews, Grateful Dead cover band concerts, and a weekend special on a dozen raw clams and oysters, which travel on ice from a different section of the Long Island Sound miles away. Returning to the view directly in front of me is the house my family reside but do not own, called a parsonage, a clergy house owned by the First Baptist Church of Branford, Connecticut. The home sits along other Cape Cod-style houses filled with primarily upper middle-class white baby boomers. The residential street gives way to Montawese Avenue, named after the Montawese Band, one of four distinct groups that comprise the indigenous Quinnipiac, unified as a tribe by their language, Kairipi, a dialect of Eastern Algonquin. A right turn on Montawese leads to Darbar, India. This popular second-generation Indian restaurant has fed the people of Branford bygone Barta with chili naan for almost 30 years. Further down Montawese, the sidewalk meets the wrought iron fence protecting Center Cemetery's grounds, showcasing the centuries-old headstones of Branford residents from days gone. The protruding memorials obscure the unremarkable empty section of the cemetery where the bodies of at least 40 enslaved Africans were discarded without headstones to identify those given a subhuman burial. Catty corner from the cemetery is the Branford Green, the town center marked with a dangling sign. Near this green, Yale College was founded in 1701 by 10 ministers who gave their books. Beyond this marker sits Trinity Episcopal Church, Town Hall, First Congregational Church, and the last in line is First Baptist Church, an American Baptist congregation gathered in 1838, where for the past 3.5 years my name holds space on the front sign above the title, Senior Minister. So what's the takeaway from that? We sit where many worlds collide. This moment in this physical space is the product of countless intersections over the centuries, right? And when stories meet, a new story is always created, for good or for ill. So I want to first talk about the indigenous story. And we have people here, and Monique's not here, she's another one, who are very knowledgeable about the indigenous population. But as you'll see, I have a few things I just want to point out and just giving a very general history. So the indigenous story first, you can follow along your pamphlet just to kind of know where I'm at. We have the indigenous people, AKA Native Americans, AKA some prefer being called American Indian or Indians, but they're indigenous people. Native American tribes have inhabited the North American continent since approximately 14,000 BC, creating a very long and rich history of Native American culture in what is now known as Connecticut. And at the time of the European colonization, when people came over here from Europe, there were at least 16 distinct tribes in Connecticut of different Native American tribes, groups of people who lived on this land. And Native American history is very long and very varied. So I will not attempt to give an adequate history of those nations and the complexities of their unique culture. There is no one Native American experience or religion. As diverse as you can think are the indigenous cultures and their religion. Instead, my goal is to emphasize a few broadly accepted elements about the indigenous experience in Connecticut. Okay? And next, we're going to move to indigenous religion, right? So when we use the word pagan spirituality, pagan has kind of a nasty idea to it. So what is pagan? Pagan refers to earth-based religions, many of which date back before Christianity, right? So that's the word pagan. So, so-called pagan spirituality existed in the Americas long before European colonizers and Puritan Christianity arrived. So when the people came over here, the colonists came over here, there was already millennia of religious traditions and spirituality that existed in the practices and the hearts of the people who lived here. Just to name a few, you have the Quinnipiac people. We all know that word. Puritans didn't bring religion to the region, but, quote, before the English invaded the lands, the Quinnipiac tribe practiced their religion. Little is known historically about this religion, except that through various rituals and ceremonies, the Quinnipiac tribe recognized and showed respect to the supernatural powers they believed to inhabit all things. You have the Pequot people. They had their own spiritual expression, quote, based on a deep attachment to the land. They have an explanation of creation with 3 tiers of life: air, land, and water, and a tree of life. And the Mohegan people. They emphasize the values they share with many other tribal nations, one of which is, quote, deep relationships and connections to Mother Earth and our homelands, reverence for the place of our ancestors, and a sense of sacred places and spiritual connection to places. So, within what could be called native ecotheology are specific spiritual practices. In other words, the religion of the indigenous was intertwined with the earth, and there were very specific religious practices they did that would demonstrate this. And as I said before, it is important that we not generalize indigenous spiritual practice as if one thing someone did is something all did. In the words of Belden Lane, there is no typical American Indian experience. Given a history dated back hundreds and thousands of years and scanning over 1,000 separate and highly developed Native American cultures, all we can do is offer a pistache or jumbled medley that suggests an ambiance more than it does describe any particular tradition. So what he's saying is there, indigenous people were spiritual, religious, and from the ones in Connecticut, the most you read about, they were earth-based and land-based, but they weren't all identical by any means. So you have the indigenous people, the indigenous religion, and the last one right there is indigenous relationship to the earth. And then we see how these are connected. Indigenous spiritual practices cannot be disconnected from the earth. In other words, there weren't indigenous people practicing a religion or believing in a deity that was just up there somewhere in here. You couldn't disconnect it from the rocks, the trees, the water, the earth, the food, the buffalo. Well, not here, but in other places, things like that. To quote Lane once more, to memorize the land is to adhere both existentially and physically to the center of all that is holy. A passion for placement is central to Indian thought. What that means is this: Indians, Native Americans had absolutely no concept of living in a way that's deeply connected to the earth, and that the earth and everything around it was living, pulsing with spirit and God. There's just no separation there. So next, we're going to talk about the colonizer story. Now, we may have been told the word settlers or pilgrims. I like the word colonizer because I think that's a more accurate depiction of what the colonists did when they came here. And the one group I'm going to talk about are the Puritans. You've heard Puritans before, right? You know who the Puritans are? They started that church next door, right? They're the reason we couldn't get this building for 200 years, The Puritans.
But they did atone for
They
that
did.
eventually.
And we wouldn't have Baptists if the Puritans didn't kick Roger Williams out of the state and make him go to Rhode Island and become a Baptist. But all that to say, let's talk about the Puritans. You have the Puritan colonizers. Who were they? The Puritan colonizers were English Protestants who founded the Massachusetts Bay Colony in the 1630s. They sought religious freedom, and they wanted the opportunity to create a society based on what they thought were biblical principles after they were persecuted in England. Right? And this was led by figures, maybe you know the name John Winthrop. They established a strict, what's called theocratic society, meaning there is no separation between church and state. If you want to vote in the election, you got to be a member of a church, okay? All in one. And their mission was to create a city on a hill, a land, a government that was completely intertwined with their faith. However, they came for religious freedom. They came for religious freedom of their own. In other words, they were only interested in protecting their religious beliefs. So don't get it twisted. They wanted religious freedom. They didn't care about your religious freedom. They wanted to be able to be who they were and actually run a land that was completely based on their very particular brand of Christianity. Okay. So let's go next. Puritan colonizer religion. When Europeans arrived on the shores of New England, they carried with them a culture that was inconceivable and foreign to the people who met them on the banks of the Atlantic. Among the most significant, they brought with them entirely different ways of engaging the land. We talked about the ways the indigenous lived with the land. When the Puritans showed up, they related to the earth, the land, in ways the indigenous couldn't have imagined. And the first of these fits under religion, which I have written there, the doctrine of discovery. What is that? This was a teaching that started out Catholic and became Protestant. And what it did was, quote, establish a religious, political, and legal justification for colonization and seizure of land not inhabited by Christians. All right? So therefore, under the doctrine of discovery, non-Christian peoples did not possess the same human and natural right to land, sovereignty, and self-determinations as the Christian people. So this was a Christian teaching, a doctrine, a statement that said Christians have right to land and non-Christians do not, because they're not God's people, or however you want to phrase it, right? So when the European colonizers, when the Puritans first walked on the shores of New England, they saw people who they believed were inferior to them and had no right to the land that they were living on because God had granted European Christians free reign and claim to whatever they discovered. The doctrine of discovery says, whatever we discover, we can have, okay? Now, this sounds absurd, right? Stories like this sound ridiculous. However, there's clear evidence for this close by, as I found in the Milford, Connecticut town records, which one of the quotes from the fellows back then is, "The earth is the Lord, the earth is given to the saints, and we are the saints." All right? That's a quote. So it was really happening. So we have and I hope you're seeing the indigenous religion connects to the indigenous relationship to the earth. The Puritan religion connects to their relationship to the earth. So Puritan colonizer relationship to the earth. So I said there's two things they brought with them that were inconceivable to the indigenous. The one was a doctrine of discovery. The other one is something we pretty much take for granted, which is the concept of individual private land ownership or land enclosure. According to the colonizers, the land and anything in it or on it could be purchased, taken by a person, a nation, or religion as something that can be permanently owned and used for whatever purposes the owner decides. Now, different indigenous tribes, especially throughout the U.S., did have different relationships to land and concepts of enclosure. But the colonizers in New England, they saw the fact that the indigenous here didn't enclose land and put up private property, and this is yours, this is mine. To them, that was a lack of sophistication, and more the reason they shouldn't even have any land to begin with. John Withrop said, "As for the natives in New England, they enclose no land, neither have any settled habitation, nor tame any cattle to improve the land, and so have no other but a natural right to those countries. So if we leave them sufficient for their use, we may lawfully take the rest." In other words, they came and they couldn't believe every person didn't have their own fenced-in plot of land where you couldn't come on, and this was mine forever, and that the animals they hunted, they didn't capture them and keep them in pens. All these different things that become normal to us. The indigenous had no concept of that. And these two factors, the doctrine of discovery and private land, differed vastly from the indigenous approach to land, to whom, in their mind, the earth was sentient, the earth was alive, and could not be owned, could not be endowed to one group or the other, where this group can have it and this group can't. Indigenous spirituality did not see land as an object or product or utility to be bought and sold, but as the place where they inhabited alongside creatures and rock formations and spirits. So the next piece there is religion and the earth. We're making good time, y'all, see? It's one of those things I have no idea how long it would take, so I just guessed. All right. Religion and the earth. So there's a place around here called Mohegan Hill, right? We have lots of cool spots where you can hike, Sleeping Giant and all these indigenous landmarks, right? Mohegan Hill, there's a famous landmark known as Moship's Rock. My kids, when they were in kindergarten, I think, went on a hike there. And you can, as a day hiker, go and observe this. It's a rock, right? But like countless other landscapes around here, the rock holds an essential piece in the history of Mohegan thought and spirituality. Because according to the indigenous people, this site is a rock embedded with the footprint of a giant named Moship who would roam around New England, right? So you have this giant who would run around and, one giant's sleeping now, so he's a mountain, looks like he's sleeping. But this rock, they say, that's the footprint. And this is a legend, and you know what? Every religion, culture, faith group just has stories like this that we hold on to. But if you were to go there today or look it up, about 50% of the time, it wouldn't be called Moship's Rock. It would be called the Devil's Footprint. Why is that? Because, quote, Euro-Christians frequently lend the devil's name to people and places valued by the Mohegans in order to denigrate them. So this is what happened. You have the Puritans and those like it come here, and there's people who have their own spirituality living with the land, and they say, oh, this is a Maship's Rock. They said it's Devil's Rock. Right? This is, this. And so making, not only believing they're inferior for other ways, but demonizing literally any of these cultures and accuse whatever they're doing as devilish or demonic. So I just want to kind of pull it together with this. Few things have shaped the process of history and the formation of humanity like religion. Religion can be used for really good and really bad because religion tells us our origin, our purpose, our future, and in religions that believe in a God, usually the God in that religion gives commands and instructions on how humans should relate to nature, what the relationship is with God, humanity, animals, plants, and the rest of the earth. So whatever a religious culture believes about its roles and responsibilities has a profound impact on its influence in history and culture, right? So if this group of people is part of their religion is you need to respect people, respect the land, well, that's going to have a good outcome. If another group says, according to your religion, you can do whatever you want to this, that, well, that's going to have bad outcomes. And we've seen this go either way. So what I'm trying to do is just really simplify what I've talked about and understand these 2 points. One, the indigenous population of the Northeast United States practice earth-based spiritualities, seeing themselves as co-inhabitants of the land alongside plants, animals, rocks, and water. And their legacy by many is revered as wise and beautiful because they stewarded the land well, the land they inhabited. Conversely, the religion of the Puritans, which represents one of many, and I think a pretty bad, expression of the Christian faith, is sadly remembered by many for arrogance and cruelty in the way the colonizers related to the land and the indigenous people. Now, had the Puritans not been Puritans, but been another group who had different views, who held a different form, a more faithful form of Christianity, their encounter with the New World may have been dramatically different. Whatever people believe is going to affect how they behave. We remember the indigenous the way they are, the Puritans the way they were. And nevertheless, the meeting of these 2 worlds, the indigenous and the Puritan, with their respective religious beliefs and relationship to the earth, laid the foundation for our nation's religion and ethics, which continues to shape the region today. So there's 2 perspectives I had there. I kind of want you to just hold on to today as our foundation. So you have the indigenous. They honored the earth and its inhabitants as an expression of their religious belief. And the Puritan colonizers, they exploited the earth and its inhabitants as an expression of their religious belief. You can get out if you need to, or it's okay. If you need to go, you can go. So do you see that there? There's 2 religious beliefs. One group honored the earth, tried to live in balance with the earth. The other just said we can take it and go. Why? Because their religion, their spirituality informed that. So I just want you to see. Puritans believed one thing about the religion. It caused them to act this way to the earth and other people. Indigenous believed another, caused them to act another way. So that's just our foundation. Just understanding this region and understanding the religious implications of our relationship to the earth. And as you can imagine, my Christian view on how we should relate to the earth is not what the Puritans believed. So next time, what I'm going to do is we're going to explore the spiritual context of Brantford right now, because we live in the legacy of those groups, as well as many other. For us, we're Baptist, and, the Baptists were in Rhode Island, and they did pretty well with the indigenous people, right? We liked them. We got along pretty well, but then we came back here. Then you have the Catholics, and then you have ba-boom, ba-boom, you have New Age, and we have everything and everything and everything now, right? And so what is the religion of Brantford now? It certainly can't be summarized in whatever churches are just on the green or things like that. So that's what we'll look at next week, and I have some good research based on that. And the following week, an overview of Christian ecotheology, which I'm going to actually then just teach my perspective on what God's intention is as we relate to the earth. And I break it down to 3 categories, so I don't cover everything, which is just land, animals, and plants. And then number 4 is I'm calling our land God's intent, which is then where we ask the question, what does it look like for us to take our property and our building and see this as an opportunity to repurpose and just look at differently the land we're on. And, some examples of things we've done is, look at the pollinator garden, look at things like that. How can we kind of lean into what I'll be teaching on, our relationship to the earth as a congregation? So that's it. I would like to open up for any questions or comments, though. Yes?
I like how Monique started sort of saying, hitting on particularly those people who lived back because they always lived
Yes.
here, and kind of makes me ashamed that all I know about the history of this spot in Vermont is that it used to be living post homes, and that in the 1800s, or perhaps prior, this is where people got punished in the stockades and the pillars. Living post hill, like, the Baptists apparently got the least desirable piece of real estate on the lake, and the best piece of real estate over there.
Yes.
And then they came over from Wallingford and given permission to use this land. Is that common?
Yeah.
Is this the stockade or the pillar? Like, when you picture that, this is.
That's the stocks, right, Susan?
Yeah, the stockade.
I think actually that one's the pillar.
Oh,
The
okay.
stocks were where you were seated
Oh.
and your legs were immobilized, so.
We should get one of those in the history room.
Yeah.
We should get some stocks.
Well, look for that.
There was no way of
They may already have been gone by the time we got it.
Yeah, so-
And of course, although oddly enough, this building is the oldest,
Yep.
aside from the academy, it's the oldest building on the green, but it's the newest congregation. And that's because the other churches were destroyed, I think, by fires in both cases.
I think they've had 4 buildings congregational.
Yeah, and part of that, I think, was probably enlarging their village
Yeah.
as their population grew. So they were already occupying those spaces. This apparently was quite hilly. They had to do a lot of grading of the land before they could start building because it was too, too hilly. So we got what was left, but I thought about this. I don't think we were being punished exactly by being given. Most of it was just kind of funny, but I think we got, the piece of it. That's the way I'd rather look at it.
Right.
It isn't quite as hostile.
There's still traces of a hill.
Yeah, it's hilly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll talk more. And if you see the back of our bulletin, we have a land acknowledgement there. That's one little step. Things like that. So this is what we'll talk about. We'll explore more, but the 4th one, we'll talk more about, what does it mean to be a congregation that practices awareness and just has a desire for, what kind of tree is that out there? Or what kind of, just an awareness of saying, like, how can we do now what we maybe wish would have been done in the past? Any other questions, thoughts?
What's interesting to me is the point that you made, because I had no idea what this talk would be about. So how from what I understand from what you said, so how the Puritans took land as a possession to own and to use for their purpose, and how the indigenous people look at land spiritually and as a part of their spirituality and religion, that it's a part of, as opposed to a piece of property to be owned.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting to me. And,
Yeah.
I wanted to be a part of this because I wanted to know where theology and the earth and the land and plants and all of that, how do they even, where do they mix? What is the relationship? And so that, the indigenous part gives me a better idea and understanding of where this is going, because I had no idea.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and that's one that sounds funny to us because owning land, but that, for a large part around here especially, it was definitely like, in the same way we think of property lines and all that, it wasn't really a category, so, they were very different in that way. Whereas Puritans came from a place where that was assumed. So it's just really interesting to see cultures, that weren't even, thinking in those terms. We don't need to, I know how to hunt, I know how to gather, and we'll go stay here for this season, maybe move up to the point in the summer to fish, whatever it is. Didn't even feel the need to do that, and then they were introduced to someone who's like, can we buy that land? Yeah, sure, buy the land. Like, you can't own land, what are you, crazy? But sure, here, buy the land, and it's just like, yes, we can, apparently, so.
So is there in theology, is there, during this course, will there be learning about how, or is there connection where in the Bible it talks about spirituality in the land?
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Yeah.
Is that in the Bible?
Mhm.
And we're gonna be talking about that?
Yep, we'll get
Because
there.
there was a question on the questionnaire, and I went all the way to no, because I
Yeah.
I haven't picked that apart from the Bible yet. I haven't seen where they talk about.
Yeah, well, so we're gonna talk about that. And this will be, it'll be a little brief, but I have tons of sources if you want to read more. Yes, isn't that?
I think about this a lot, partly because I'm a descendant of people who came here and did a lot of these things, but also because I have a lot of Native American friends.
Yes.
And so I think about, what happened when these two very different cultures came together. And Christians, I mean, we are descendants religiously of the Jews who believed that they were God's chosen
Yeah.
people. And that they had been given dominion over the earth. So if you have that idea embedded in your head, and this is part of your religious thinking, then when you meet another group of people who believe that the land is there for the benefit of everyone and no one really owns it, it's just you take care of it and it takes care of you. And then the people who have come want to buy a piece of this land. They're looking at this transaction through Western eyes or through Western European eyes or European eyes. Their understanding of buy is completely different. And so they don't realize that the Native Americans, the Indians, don't grasp that concept. The Native people didn't understand probably the full meaning of buy. So there were times when land was actually sold. I mean, Roger Williams bought the land that became Providence.
Yes.
And I wonder if people he bought it from, who were his friends, they had a very friendly relationship.
Yeah.
I wonder if they fully understood what that meant.
Yeah.
Exactly. So each side was looking at these transactions
Yes.
through their own lens.
Yep.
And I think that accounted for a lot of the misunderstandings, which is not to say that
No.
terrible things didn't happen, but I think it all started probably with a misunderstanding on both sides.
Yeah, I think so too, and that's what it's like, just seeing these two groups who have these radically different ways of understanding the land, which if you had never been told someone can buy or own land, you just live in land, it would be weird to you when someone's like, can we buy this? What? You want to use it? You give me money? Like, it's just, so, yeah, they're coming from completely different worldviews, mind frames, and then, again, religions. And you made a great point, and this will be a big one we talk about, is Genesis 1 is a big one because you have Adam and Eve, and they are given dominion over the earth. But is dominion the best word to use? So that's the question we'll talk about. Or are they stewards of the earth? Or are they gardeners of the earth? Or are they caretakers of the earth? And the way people have interpreted that and used it for their benefit has been used for a lot of destruction. Well, that's,
What is the name?
well, to rule over. So we'll talk about that in the week. What does rule over mean? What was God's intention? Was it you could just take whatever and have it, or was it you're supposed to be a gardener or a caretaker? I know our Ethiopian friends are out there. Is there any other questions?
I just wanted to say, it's kind of like, if someone came here and they think the land is just fruits or everything.
Yeah.
Instead of buying parcels.
Yeah.
And nowadays, people that live near the ocean and beaches, their house is here. They think they own
Right,
this
yeah,
property here, and they own that.
The water.
ocean.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, right.
And that kind of is what it makes me
Yeah.
think of when you're talking
Yeah.
about all this in
Yes.
the beginning. Because people really do think, oh, this is mine. No, it's not yours.
All right.
You know, the ocean is everybody's.
Yeah.
But you have to get to it by not going on people's property.
Yeah, you can take a boat up right up to the shoreline though if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. But you can take your kayak right 5 feet from the shore and fish.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anything else?
Where's Mohegan Joe?
Yeah, I never heard that.
I'll have to find it out for you.
Mohegan Hill. Well, that's what we're meeting Sunday, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this will be a topic I preach on more. We'll do a Bible study, we'll expand on. Unfortunately, because this is just meant to be, do 4 weeks and do an overview. But what I'd like to do at the end of all this is then, for those who are interested, okay, do we want to create a ministry or a team who focuses on this stuff? Or do we want to have a Bible study about this for 12 weeks or a sermon series? So think of this as kind of like a launch pad. If this is something you say, oh, this is something I'm interested in. I'm interested in nature, earth, birds, God, and all these things.
I love the way you introduced and explained Frankfurt. I mean, I actually closed my eyes and pictured
Yeah,
you
that's
sitting
great.
there, because this is our town.
Yeah.
You know, that osprey nest, we see that
Yeah.
from the dining room. You know, we saw that all, got blown up or on fire
Yeah.
and then came back. And so it was like I was living it with you because it's our town.
It is, and
Our place.
and if you take some time to pay attention like that, you're like, there are so many stories and so many people groups that if you just look around and be like, where did this come from? Where did this come from? It's just layers and layers, and it's really a lot. It's really interesting.
Walk through the cemetery, you'll see Blackstone, you'll see Hosley, you see all the names.
Or ones I always say hi to when I run by there, McCrillis.
Yeah.
And better,
There's a lot.
farther down the hill.
Yeah.
And, oh gosh, who else?
There's a lot of, just when we walk through.
It's
like,
beautiful.
These are all street names now.
And what I think is always funny is, I don't remember really having Indian food out till 2008 maybe. And you guys have had an Indian restaurant here for almost 30 years. It's just such a funny, this kind of small New England town. It's just, the whole thing is just a fascinating collision of worlds. There's so much going, but we'll talk more about that. Yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to email me if we chat. But now we have the dates here. It's not next week. Yeah, it's the 5th and the 12th and the 26th, okay? Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Couldn't do this without you.